All right, at this time, I would like to welcome in my guest, September Frogley, who is the founder of Connection is the Cure. September, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here.
Well, it's exciting to have you, and hopefully I will not do that slip again. So, burn it into my brain. September Frogley. So, September has a great story. Obviously, she has a great cause that she's doing with Connection is the Cure. But for people that are listeners of the show that may not know her story or know about Connection is the Cure, I kind of just want to start out by just having you share your story with people and kind of what led you down this path to establish this foundation and to kind of be involved in the great work that you're doing now.
Thank you. Yes. So I grew up here in the Valley, in our Treasure Valley. It's a great place to grow up, and have two younger brothers. And my middle brother, Robert, was just the most tenacious and persistent and big spirit, big energy, big spirit. He was always just intense. And he was so successful in life, like but also struggled too, I think, with those big emotions and big thought processes. And when we were growing up back in the 80s and 90s, there just wasn't a lot of focus and awareness and help for people that were struggling, especially I think kids. And so he did struggle with his mental health and had to really learn to find different tools and coping mechanisms. And throughout high school, he really did. He was really into athletics and that energy spent there. And he taught himself how to play the guitar and how to sing. And he really threw himself into his schoolwork. He was very intelligent. And I think as life went on, as we all do, we become adults and we get busy, and life kind of piles up, and we start to forget or lose those tools and
coping straight. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because of all the distractions that come with getting older and having a family and going to school and just all of the responsibilities. So as life went on, that became more and more apparent that his mental health was really going down the tubes, really. Like, he was not focusing on himself,
self-care or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And just burning the candle at both ends. And he was going to nursing school and went on to do nurse anesthesia school, and both really stressful professions, and a lot of traumatic experiences and what you see and who you're taking care of. And he just held that all in, and we knew that he was not doing okay, but and we would try to talk to him and ask him, but he just he had a hard time opening up, I think. In some ways he was an open book. In some ways he really kept things in because he had such a high expectation of himself. There was this huge perfectionist piece. He could give grace and love and acceptance and forgiveness to anyone that came to him, but when he would go to turn that inward, it was literally impossible for him to accept any kind of failure or inadequacy, or
just less than or whatever, like kind of weakness, maybe even, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And he was always pushing the envelope as well, like adrenaline, like. And so I think that too, sometimes the environments that he was in, he never felt like he quite fit either. Like, that sense of belonging was always a struggle because he was always just a little bit of a circle when he was trying to fit himself into this square,
Yeah.
Especially I think when it comes to just organized religion and school settings. And he just was always a little off from what he felt. So anyway,
that kind of was the norm, or what you think is the norm, right? I mean, that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
Just what you see as maybe being the norm or type of thing. So yeah.
Yes. I will say that his mission that he served for our church in Ecuador, that 2 years of his life, I think that was the time where his mind was the most quiet, and there was a sense of like surrender to himself. Like he I think battled himself the least on that mission because it was so service oriented. You know,
Right.
he loved the people of Ecuador and his mission there. So
Good
that,
way to get outside yourself too, right? And just kind of
yeah,
like it kind of gives you that focus of purpose of like something, okay, I'm just gonna put whatever's going on for me. I mean, you hope that missionaries do that anyway, but in this case, like probably gave an outlet for that, right?
yes. And it was like so acceptable because that's what he was
Hmm.
supposed to be doing, you know?
Right, right.
Um, so as time went on, this is probably over about a 5 year period. Um, the weight that he carried and the weight that he put on himself and the void that was there and this constant, you know, I mean, at this point he had sought help for some of this stuff, and he'd gotten some different diagnoses, like a diagnosis of like major depressive disorder, and he had a lot of OCD tendencies, and also had gotten a diagnosis of attention deficit. So um, he started taking Adderall.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, just to let you know, I'm not against like medication
Medication, yeah.
or
Hmm.
like I have an attention deficit that I'm medicated for. And so I'm not, you know, it's
Yeah,
like
anti whatever type thing, or
right.
yeah. Hmm.
But for him and with that adrenaline seeking, like addictive, like he had a lot of addictive tendencies
Hmm.
that he struggled with before drugs came into play. Um, but he started abusing his own Adderall,
Hmm.
and he did things to an extreme. So like if a little was good, then a lot was going to be even better.
Yeah,
Everything to an extreme. And sometimes it served him really well. And sometimes it, uh,
goes the other way.
at the end
Yeah.
was
Hmm.
a huge detriment. So he started misusing his own prescriptions, and that led into misusing pain medication, um, some that was prescribed and some that wasn't. And it just took him down a path of total destruction. So when those things became too hard to get,
Yeah.
legally,
Yeah.
uh, he reached, to illicit drugs. And I remember having a conversation with him. And the first time he tried heroin, it was like he had tried a couple different things leading up to that. And heroin just had this hook on him. It was like, you know, it had a grip
Hmm.
that first, high. And he really, uh, I think that was kind of the beginning of the end. So, like I said, he walked down a really extreme path of drug use, and he was in and out of rehab a handful of different times, and he was able to hide his extreme drug use for quite a while from
Okay.
everyone because he still was very seemingly put together on the outside.
Hmm.
He hid all of this stuff really, really well until he couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
And when he couldn't, it really blew up. And he went through a really painful divorce, and was separated from his children, and lost his ability to practice as a nurse. And at that point he decided to come back to Idaho from where he was at in Tennessee. And I thought, as his sister, like, oh, if we could just get him back here, get him back to his roots, get him back to remembering all those great coping mechanisms he had, then we can fix him.
Hmm.
Like, because I'm
Yeah.
a fixer and I'm a
Yeah.
saver and I just want everyone to be happy. Little did I know that that was not what was going to happen.
Mm.
So, like I said, he spent time in and out of rehab. He would be able to stay sober for, months at a time, and then he would fall back into using. And, when I look at addiction as a whole now, it's like you can be sober and still and not be self-medicating with the drugs or alcohol, or
Hmm.
whatever it is that the addiction is. But if the reason why you're using in the first place is not
Isn't, yeah,
addressed
fixed or dress. Yeah.
worked
Yeah.
on, and
Hmm.
then you're going to go back, or you're just going to live miserable and not, even if you're not using, you're still not in recovery.
Yeah. Well, and
um
even like one quick thing, just like you're saying that, I just keep thinking, even just the idea of like, especially with the high levels of perfectionism, high levels of expectation for yourself, you're also going to deal with high levels of shame. And shame is like one of the most negative, obviously, emotions that we can feel, but it's also that emotion that keeps us from opening up, or keeps us from, sharing more, being more transparent, or even like feeling like we can work on the stuff that's maybe seems like, negative to other people or whatever. And so it's like, like you said, even with that, without that coping or without the ability to kind of deal with that or learn how to deal with that, you just kind of, it's just a little bit of a, not necessarily that it ends up in suicide, but just like it's a ticking time bomb for disaster, because you're not learning how to manage that key emotion that happens every time you fall short, or you disappoint yourself, or you let somebody down, or whatever. That shame's just like I don't know, it's like a 300-pound weight that just is, um it's a difficult thing. So anyway, sorry but that's.
no, and that's exactly, I mean, in the end, that's exactly what happened. Like, his shame,
Hmm.
he loathed himself because he carried so much shame. Like, he became every single one of the mistakes that he had made.
Yeah.
um so as it got closer to the end of his life, he had gotten into some really serious drugs. He was using bath salts and meth and heroin still. And the bath salts, at the year before he passed, he had a psychotic break. So they induced this state of uh, like paranoia, like schizophrenia, paranoia. It was like the voices. He was having like tactile delusions. Like, he was um, just in this awful state of mind. I feel like the drugs that he was using like stole him
Hmm.
before he passed. Like, he was there physically, but it was just this such a painful thing to watch unfold. And throughout that last year, um, he did go to rehab one more time, which I'm so thankful for that. We had an opportunity to go to the Walker Center in Gooding, Idaho, which is amazing, and participate in a family program with him. I felt like there was some really good lessons that us as his family had to learn before losing him, so
Hmm.
that we could do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And I spent nights with him in the hospital, on overdoses, was able to see, um, unfortunately, a different side of healthcare. We come from a family of nurses, and I have so much respect and love for the people that are caring for people in the hospital. But it was a different side bringing an addict in, to see the way that he was treated.
Hmm.
And there's no good solution, and I'm not saying that, but it was just a whole other side that I felt like we had to see to
Yeah.
be able
It's
to
like,
do.
it's kind of like the bad apple ruins the core, right? Where it's like, the mindset is like, oh, it's a drug seeker, they're coming in for this, or they're whatever. There's that tainted kind of dynamic there that I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, not making it okay for nurses to whatever, but
Yeah,
it's a yeah,
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
but.
because you as the family member are sitting there looking at them in this hospital bed,
Hmm.
and they weren't always
That way.
that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
They started out as, I was 5 years older than him, so it was like second mother. It's
Hmm.
like watching my child in this bed that has become this totally other person, that I love so much, and I so desperately want him to heal and find peace. And
Yeah.
um so just having those experiences, I think, really was eye-opening. And I'm a really hopeful person, but it was like getting to the point where it was like, where is the hope in this? Do people recover from
Hmm.
addiction? Do they, I mean, even if they recover, can they go on to live a normal life, or is too much damage done? Or, and I know each situation is so unique, but after his last really big overdose, um, some things transpired that he ended up in trouble with the law for the first time on a suicide attempt, um, and he really, I could tell that he was just so defeated at that point, and because he was so tenacious and persistent, like he rallied again, and he was like, okay, like I can do this. We can do this. I'm going to need a lot of help. I'm going to, and so we started on that path again. And about 6 weeks after that attempt and incident, and we did end up losing him to suicide on May 9th of 2021. And there's so much emotion that goes into losing someone by suicide, and shame,
Yeah,
and
right. Hmm.
um, uh, a feeling of
Maybe in fear, like is fear part of
fear,
it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
a feeling of inadequacy because you feel like as a family member maybe you didn't do enough.
Hmm.
You kind of forget how agency plays in,
Yeah.
um, and you the shame, I think, is a big one, and I had recognized so much from him, the shame that that he
He
carried,
carry. Hmm.
is that I didn't want to carry that same shame. And I remember uh, probably the day or maybe 2 days after he had passed, I remember praying and receiving a very distinct impression that um, it was my responsibility to go on to tell this story, to tell our family's story, to eliminate the shame, because
This
ultimately I think that's what took
his life.
Robert.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and I think so. I really started from the very beginning practicing transparency and being really open. Like in his obituary, we talked about, there's a paragraph that talked about, like, if you or any of your family members are struggling, um, we feel like the transparency is really important to the healing journey. And then at
Yeah.
his funeral, I spoke very openly about his suicide in an appropriate way, but very open about his suicide, his struggles, so that it didn't leave people wondering, like, what happened? Like, I mean, there were people who had seen him months prior and they were like, what? So helping kind of connect those things. And that was not all of him, like he was not just this, but that was a part of him, like
Right.
his mental illness, his drug use, ultimately his suicide. That was all part of him. So
Hmm.
not that that should be the focus, but it was there, so
Well,
um
one thing, if you don't mind me jumping in really
yeah,
quick,
yeah,
something that, even for listeners and some people, I mean, obviously we could look at it and we can say, okay, well, like the drug use or this or that, maybe that was a bigger part of whatever. And people are going to have their own assessments of things. But I want to read something that you had posted recently on The Connection is the Cure. And I think there's a quote, if I got it, it was something your brother used to say. Today, let us have compassion and allow others their limitations without judgment. And I think that is such a huge thing, as far as this, not only this scenario, but even just in the ability to talk openly, because we can look at somebody's situation and we can have judgments like about what we see, about what we think is going on for them. But, we don't know the underpinnings of that mental illness, or we don't know the underpinnings of like how that person may be struggling with shame or whatever it may be that's going on. And I think the counter to that, to our ability to have compassion, to be able to not, to be like, there's another statement, like, be curious, not judgmental, like to be curious, to try to understand, to try to learn about, or try to just love or care for somebody. I just thought that's a great statement. And really kind of points to the idea of like this whole notion of prevention, or try to kind of have, bring people in a better way, where it's like we have to really open our hearts and minds and be willing to hear from them, as well as, again, suspend our own judgments about what might, what we think might be going on. So anyway, I just wanted to interject that, but yeah.
And that is like, those words that Robert, had said at, in different conversations that we had, have become like total words to live by for me. And
Hmm.
the beautiful thing about it is it's such a hard practice, because I think that's a lot of times where our minds go, especially when we've kind of let our mind, well, when we're kind of trained to do that.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
almost, unfortunately, like not a great side of human nature, right? To like,
Right.
to that judgment. But as I have like worked on that so much, it's like a point of surrender. Like, I don't have to use my energy that's so precious to pass judgment, or try to figure out someone else's situation, or try to fix something else, or
Hmm.
that I don't have control over. So it's really, it's been such a valuable um lesson for me to learn, for sure. Um so after losing Robert in May um of 2021, we went through that summer, um and I just felt this feeling of not being able to sit still. And I didn't know what we were supposed to do, or how we were supposed to do it, but I just, that idea or concept of being able to tell this
The
story,
story.
because the
Yeah.
story was so many other people's story too,
Hmm.
with just different little twists and turns, right? So um I had some really unique and amazing experiences that summer that I think built this foundation for what was coming. But in September of 2021, I had found out that there was an artist in Utah that was doing some suicide prevention stuff. So I just reached out to him on Instagram and said, "Hey, do you think you could come to Idaho and put on one of your concerts?" And he was very receptive and said, "Yeah, let's do it." So basically, he said, "I will come and do the concert, and like, you and your community have to build everything else."
Mm.
So, as far as the fundraising and the venue, and I mean, I had no idea really
What
what we
was?
were getting into. um, but I was very determined.
Hmm.
And so I called about, I don't know, 10 friends and said, "Hey, can we meet one night and just talk about this idea that has come up and see if we can make something happen?" Oh, and before that, the idea of connection as the cure was swirling, because I think there was a point where we could kind of pinpoint a huge disconnect with Robert. And from
Hmm.
that point is when things really went downhill. So that idea of, connection being, it's like, for me, I think all roads lead back to connection. And that was
Hmm.
like the thought process. So connection is this
Yeah.
healing uh rest state,
Hmm. Well, and
and
one of Brene Brown's big thing about going back to shame too is shame leads to disconnection. So like, again, so you have this process that's tearing you away, that's leading you into disconnection, but yet connection is where the healing comes. So, and it's like, again, it's twofold. It's the person that's struggling, and it's the people on the outside that need to be more willing to be open and not let shame about like even having issues. Oh, or we maybe have a son or a daughter that's struggling with some things. It's like, if we feel like the shame of that as a parent, like, oh, I'm not raising, I did something wrong with my kid or whatever, versus just being open about it. It's like, either way, shame's like doing its thing, but the connection part is really critical. So
yeah, it's so isolating, like,
mhm.
and it just totally, I think, takes everything you care about and everything that you think you know and turns it upside down, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so these my friends that they knew Robert, they knew, like, everyone just kind of started to rally, and it was so cool because I think hard things happen all the time, but like they happen and then everyone's like really, really like supportive and really there, and but then a little bit of time passes and it's like
Yeah.
they're on to the next thing 'cause other
Right.
hard things are happening, you know.
Yeah.
But it was like I just felt this really intense momentum to take action. Like I had to move. Like it was not something that I could sit still. And I even had that feeling, I think, from God, from Robert. Like it was this, like, I'm gonna make you so uncomfortable that you will not be able to sit still. You have to go. Like, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then I mean, later on, fast forward now, like so many of my own insecurities and this lack of belief in myself, like it's taken me this long. We've done all this, but it's taken me this long to actually start to really have that belief in myself,
Mm.
that this is even
This is, yeah,
possible,
this has
you
got
know?
some,
Yeah.
this is a valuable thing and I can do
Yes.
this.
Because it started out as my opinion. Like I just thought it was my opinion that this was important. So it was
Hmm.
hard, but now looking back over the last year and a half, like it is not my opinion. This is fact that this is
It's what's needed, right?
right.
Yeah.
So we just hit the ground running. We started calling businesses, we started calling the Idaho Center, different venues, like there was a miracle every single day. Because the things that were falling into place and the things that we were able to pull together in such a short amount of time should not have happened, but
Hmm.
they did. And um we ended up having this big event at the Idaho Center last year, and thousands of people came. And that was another thing. We didn't know if anyone was going to show up. We didn't know. We didn't know if we just did all this. We're like, well, even if no one comes, we'll do it again next year, and maybe we'll. And it was so cool to see. Um, as far as connection goes, like you would start to talk to someone and with an ask. There's so many people in our valley that want to help, but they don't know how. So like
Hmm.
given a specific ask that is in their wheelhouse, they're like so willing to jump on board because they're like, I can do that. And then
Yeah.
it's part of this bigger thing. So, and then talking to people too that had been affected by this, you'd start to explain to them what you wanted to do. And sometimes you'd get this really glazed over look, like, I don't get it. And then sometimes people would just like, you'd see it click and it's like, oh, which this year has been so much easier because we have this proof of like concept, where it's like,
Yeah.
they've seen it. So, and I would say, like, I don't know what I want this to look like, but I know what I want it to feel like.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, so yes, it was awesome. We had this event, and we had local resource booths. Like one of our main missions is to connect people to people and people to resources. And then also sidebar from what our goal was there, it was connecting resources to resources too. There was a lot of people who didn't know the other organization existed.
Right. Right.
Um, and then we had speakers like for the onstage portion, and then we had a free concert, and everything was free due to all these generous donors in our community. Um, and one of our speakers from Arizona that came up, he was like, I want to take this back to my community. So we were able to do another event down in Mesa, Arizona in July, which same thing. I didn't know if we could recreate this energy and this spirit that existed in the room that night. And the planning process was totally different, but the end result was the same. It was the same feeling.
Feel. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
same feeling of hope. And you think that getting together to talk about this really hard stuff would be like so depressing, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's like this, you just like leave it all at the door and you come in, and for that moment in time you're unified and you're there together. um and I think the purpose of this big event is to break the ice for these hard conversations, in hopes
Mhm.
that if we can break that ice, then in this, environment of, sorry.
That's all right. You're good. You're good.
Yes.
All right.
So I think breaking the ice, these conversations, and then in hopes that, if we can bring more light and awareness and normalizing these conversations, that then those conversations can go and continue in our homes, in our churches, in our schools, letting people know that it's okay to talk about things and discuss things. And we have such a focus in our society on our physical health,
Mhm.
I think,
Yeah.
but but
The mental
realize,
health doesn't get the
yes,
same, yeah, the
yes,
same priority. It's
right.
still more stigmatized, although it shouldn't be, and
Yeah.
needs to, and I think there's definitely been a shift. I just want to throw something at you. I came across this. Uh, this is Tony Robbins was on a show, and he cited the CDC had recent findings. He said 45% of high school students that were interviewed were so depressed in 2021. 1 in 5 considered suicide, and 9% of those actually attempted. Now, it didn't say like how many succeeded, but still, I mean, 45% of the high school students interviewed were depressed or severely depressed. So we obviously have just came through some difficult times where we've seen an increase in, depression, struggles, mental health, all that. So, I mean, hopefully, again, the corner's turning with that, but almost because we've been forced to in a lot of ways. It hasn't been necessarily by, you know gentle persuasion or whatever, but it's been a lot of, like, oh, okay, we have to do this because there's so much, stuff going on that kind of needs to be, but regardless, we're here. And then I think, organizations like yourself definitely offer a great thing for that message to continue. And kind of like what you said, even with your own self, it's like, the whole thing about people is we're great at forgetting, right? We're great at like moving on. And it's like, okay, well, I feel better now, so I can just move on, like I'm not depressed now, so I can just move on. And this whole thing with, mental health, and with the awareness thing, and obviously connection, it's like that's a movement that just needs to continue to move forward. It's not something we can forget about. We can't forget about, okay, maybe we're away from 2021, but the idea that all our problems are going to go away and everything's just going to be fine now, it's like that's not where we want to find ourselves. Obviously, we want to, use what we've learned and be able to take it and even go to a better place with it. Which is, like you'd kind of referred to, some of like the goals that you have as an organization, which if you want to speak to some of those goals, I know you mentioned you want to connect people with resources. What are some of the other things that you guys hope to accomplish?
So we really want to just dive into the community. I mean, we did like a, mental health awareness thing with the city of Meridian, like a little event in May. We have some really awesome things on the docket. Like we want to be able to bring in different speakers that are speaking more specifically. I mean, at the event, it's like little snippets, right? These people are getting up and just sharing little things, but encouraging people to, reach out instead of holding everything in or running from things. And I think such a huge part of that is, empowering people to know and realize that as humans, like we are built with this like ability to connect. Like it
Hmm.
is hardwired in us, and, we all have that ability. So just shifting that perspective just a tiny bit, and taking that as a power, like a superpower that we
Yeah.
have, and taking time every day to make a connection. And that could be, we know that those connections with yourself are really important, like that, you know, connecting
Right.
within yourself, connecting with your higher power, and connecting, with others around you. So taking, uh, the person down in Arizona, the guy down in Arizona that had come up and actually is coming up to speak again this year, he has something called the Take 10 initiative, and it's to take 10 minutes a day to make a meaningful connection. And has a few little suggestions of like making that connection face to face,
Mm.
leaving the person with a message of hope, doing something that alleviates, their stress. And you could like apply that to yourself or someone else or your higher power. But
Yeah.
those three, you know, um, those three things, when you can connect with all three,
It's
things kind
even,
of
yeah,
fall into
more
place.
significant or more.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think too, utilizing for me, God and religion and all of that is so, so important. Um, and I know that everyone sits differently with that. There are different places of that journey. And I think sometimes after losing Robert and looking at his perfectionism and looking at some of the things, it was a huge eye opener to me that, like, oh, we are part of the same gene pool and we do struggle with some of the same things. We just chose different paths.
Hmm.
But there was so much of that within myself. And I really had to recognize that when I was going through a hard time and I was, referring to the things that, or utilizing the things that I'd been taught, like that I needed to pray and I needed to read my scriptures and I needed to go to the temple and I needed to do these things because these are the things that were going to keep me afloat. Those things all keep us, they
Yeah.
kept me afloat.
Hmm.
But I think God also has given us all these other really amazing tools and resources that I was holding back from using because I thought that if I was good enough or righteous enough or worthy enough, that all I needed to do was pray and those things should be like
Go
lifted,
away.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But I see like all these things that we have. We have, therapists and counselors and medication and, so many different modalities of help and
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah. Hmm.
So utilizing those things as well. I think that God really expects us, or not expects us, but um,
Well, he's given, I mean, maybe not expect is the right word,
right,
but obviously
to act
has,
on,
yeah, to like, okay,
yeah,
here's some
seek
things.
out,
Yeah.
act on
Right. Right.
things that will
It's
help
right.
along with the things that
The
the
Are
spiritual things
spiritual or
that
yeah.
we know
Right.
help.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
has been so cool.
well, something you said before about like, and I think this kind of goes along with one of your kind of missions about normalizing, encouraging conversations about mental health. So I looked up and I'd given a talk on this a while ago. It's actually part of one of my podcasts, episode 53, if people want to go back to that, about suicide prevention. But I talked about 5 myths that we kind of have in relation to suicide prevention. And one of them is that you have to be a professional to help somebody in this state. And that's just not the case. In fact, if anything, it's almost like the opposite, because I think a lot of times people, especially if they're struggling with like some kind of suicidality, and I get that maybe some of their issues might come before that, but like if they get to that point where they're there, I think they almost like fear a mental health professional more because they're worried about what's going to happen to me. Am I going to get sent away? Am I going to whatever? So I think the people on the ground level, family, friends, those people are so important. And so if we can give um I guess the message to the people around us that we're not going to be judgmental, that we can be open, that we can be supportive, that we can talk about these things, that if there is a moment where they feel that in their lives, they won't hesitate to reach out. I remember giving a workshop in a church setting, and we were kind of talking about it after a recent uh, person in their congregation had attempted suicide. It was a young man in there, and it was just amazing the number of stories that came out from parents who had a friend of their kid reach out to them and let them know that they were concerned about their child because of something they had told them. And so again, even from that perspective, it's like a lot of those conversations, a lot of those connections come in a different way, and we all can play a part in that. It's definitely not a professional only kind of thing, right? It's like, there's so many people that can impact and have an impact on, those who are struggling. But it definitely, I think, starts with, like you said, just kind of normalizing it, making it more something that we can talk about, something that we don't have the judgments about, but we just try to, love and care and be supportive in whatever way we can. So anyway, I know I just went off, but I just wanted to share that, as far as like, I think that's a big part of, what I appreciate about what you're doing, is because there is so much needed on that level of like, just the people that you come in contact with every day are going to have a big impact on you. So
Yeah, and that is huge. And I didn't know that this resource existed, but like, so the Idaho Lives project is funded through the state education department and the state of
mhm.
Idaho. And they have suicide training for, they will make their suicide training specific to any group that they're addressing. So, they have one specific for youth, they have one specific for ecclesiastical leaders, teachers, coaches, foster parents, like, and they will come and put on a training for free.
Mm.
Like, and their training is amazing. So
Oh,
like,
wow.
um, after we did our event, like I went to some of my church leaders and asked if we could have a training, and we did. Like, anyone that had any involvement in a leadership position, especially with youth, was invited to this training.
Uh-huh.
And they made the training so specific to um,
That
youth
group
leaders,
yeah. Hmm.
religious, like ecclesiastical leaders, and so there's these really cool resources that are available that that are there, and I think probably being underutilized. So um and
Yeah.
that is a huge part of what we're trying to do too, is bring these,
Awareness to those, or
yes,
yeah.
bring awareness to, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, a lot
Hmm.
of time and energy has been put into these programs. So like, just making people aware that they exist. And I think really, um, and I know maybe this is like kind of extreme, but I think anyone that has interaction with youth in general, because really I think that's like where a lot of the focus is, because that's where the change is going to come from,
Hmm.
from these young people, um, changing the narrative, and then also demanding from the generation above them for the change too.
Yeah.
So I think anyone that is working with youth, um, should have that training, like should have, the training that the Idaho Lives Project gives, or some of the trainings that you can do online with the Speedy Foundation, or specific to suicide. Also, when it comes to addiction and drug use, like, there's so much going on, um, that's targeting our youth when it comes to drugs, especially with the fentanyl epidemic that's on the horizon. I mean, we haven't been as hit hard here, but in bigger cities and, different places, um, being able to have those conversations about drugs and how, I don't know, I've heard a lot of people talk about, from our generation, like, it's okay to do a little this or experiment a little or do, but with fentanyl being put in everything, it's just so dangerous.
Scary.
So
Yeah.
having that awareness, having the awareness of like Narcan and naloxone, like I've been in touch with, like I know now in the West Data School District, like all the SROs are carrying Narcan with them. They're, trying to get it into the hands of the nurses and that are at the schools. And so awareness about those kinds of things for parents, I think we all should have that. And I
Yeah.
know that's, I don't know. It's
No, I mean, I think, like, again, it kind of just starts I mean, you have to start in that place. Like I said, I think the other thing that I took from that is just that, as far as like with the youth, like, also, if we can get them in a place where they feel like, okay, like it's okay to talk about things or to have difficulties and not feel like weakness is a bad thing. All the things that maybe we grew up feeling like were not okay, then that gives them an avenue of maybe they're quicker to get those resources or to ask for help. But the parents above them have to be willing to then know where the help can be and not just push that help away. And so it is definitely a multi-tiered effort. But I mean, even with the change being at the youth level, I mean, just even helping them to feel like it's okay, like they're not bad or wrong or abnormal because they have struggles or whatever. So getting that message out there to them is huge too, for sure. So
yeah, and like my oldest is 17, and he has he has had his fair share of teenage struggles, and I think that are not unique to him. I think a lot of kids struggle, like the statistic that you read. He has become very close with the counselor that he has seen for the last X amount of years, and he has become a good friend of our family. And my next son coming up was, expressed interest in wanting to go talk to Keaton's friend
right.
too, as he referred to him.
uh
So I was talking to my oldest and said, I think we'll probably, keep going with him. And he was like, yeah, I think it's awesome because he just said, like, I think so much of my maturity and perspective and what I've been able to overcome and manage came from my relationship with my counselor.
yeah.
He really did become his friend and
hmm
was just another adult in his life that had a really positive influence. And I think that it really does take a village. Like, we need
hmm
as many positive adult influences in our kids' life as we can get, whether it's family or outside the family. Um, but
yeah.
that was an eye opener to me. Like, and my oldest is this big, tough, stubborn, ornery, you know, guy, and he's sitting there going, "Yeah, I think everyone should like everyone
Go to
could
counseling.
benefit from seeing
Yes.
a counselor."
Right.
So yeah,
Well, I don't disagree with that, but
yeah.
but to have it come from like you said, your son that maybe doesn't have that maybe aura to him is
Mhm.
good. And but I think that's part of the difference that we're seeing, or that I see too with young people that I work with, is just like, you know, a lot of times it's not their parents saying, "Hey, I think maybe you need to see somebody." It's them going to their parents and saying, "Hey, I think I could really use seeing somebody." And so they're being proactive for themselves too, which is great to see. But again, I think things like that you're doing and getting the message out there is part of that. So anyway, I don't want to take up more of your time, but if you just want to tell us a little bit about the event that's coming up and just kind of go through that so people can know what's coming up with that, and just take us through that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we have this next big event and as we go on throughout 2023, I just want everyone to know that there is a place for everyone in this movement. Like, we really do consider this a movement. We want to be able to um, come to the table with something for everyone, a place for everyone. We know how important that sense of belonging and connection is when it comes to uh, the ability to thrive.
Mhm.
So, this event that we're having again at the Idaho Center is on January 17th, and the doors will open at 5 p.m. And we want to give everyone a little extra time this year to just go through the resource booths because we are going to have so many. And there's going to be lots of resources that have to do with suicide prevention and awareness and addiction recovery and mental health in general. But then also there's going to be some really cool like interactive booths that deal more on the side of connection, like different places to connect, like finding our different interests and what clicks for us, as far as
Mhm.
being part of something. Um, and then the onstage portion will be from 6:30 to 8:30, and we have some really cool speakers. We've got two people coming up from Arizona. One of them is former quarterback from BYU and
Max Hall.
from
Mhm.
Arizona Cardinals. So he has a really cool recovery story and has really taken his experience and is helping a lot of people now. And then Brock Bevel is a retired police officer He was run over in the line of duty, which resulted in serious injuries and then led into an opioid addiction. And he's been in recovery now for like the last 13 years and has a really cool boots on the ground, like get out there and help the people that feel like they're not worth it,
Mhm.
basically, you know, very action based, which I think is really fitting for some people. And then Smith Alley is from Utah, 19-year-old, has started a foundation, I think when he was about 15, to help aid other teens that are struggling
Mm.
uh, with their mental health, with thoughts of suicide, with addiction. He had a really serious pornography addiction that led him down a path where he was ready to take his life. And that plan was disrupted. And he just has such a cool story. And he is like so enthusiastic. It's awesome. So the kids, the youth love him. Like he came for a youth event that we had in the fall, and it was like they just all can't help but to just glean from his energy. So, and then Ben Fuller is our musical performer this year. Oh, we have one other speaker too. Sorry,
That's
Autumn
right.
String. She's awesome. She was very instrumental in starting Just Serve here in the Valley, and
Oh, okay.
she has some really personal experiences with some very serious mental health struggles, and just how service and getting outside of ourselves
Benefited that or helped her. Yeah.
yeah, and like brought her through and now has brought her to this point. So, and then Ben Fuller is a Christian artist. He is amazing. We had him come and perform at our event in Mesa, Arizona. He has been in recovery for like the last 3 years now. And just that his story of redemption and hope from where he was to where he is now, but still being able to, I love his message of I was here and I let God in and now I'm here, but I still struggle. It's not like the happily ever after, that everyone
Right.
wants to hear. It's not like just because I am here now doesn't mean I don't have all of this stuff too. Like that's part of our lives, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's so cool the way he delivers that. And he so he'll perform a concert and then in between his songs kind of shares about his story and how he got to where he is now. So 6:30 to 8:30 is the onstage part. And then like I said, we have lots of awesome things planned throughout the year. We'll also be collecting donations at the door, and you can find a list of those donations on our website. We put together care packs throughout the year for people that are at local facilities that are either entering or exiting, like really basic toiletry items and clean pair of socks and underwear. And I think we were able to distribute close to 3,000 of those care packs throughout the
Oh,
valley over the last year. So,
awesome.
um, so yes, yep.
Well, one really thing I want to say just on what Ben had said about his story. I know people can hear more about, or get more information or whatever. Or I don't know if he talks about it much when he's singing or he does kind of share his story while he's performing. Is that part of it? Or
Yes, that's a huge part of it.
oh,
He's
okay.
like the tell your story thing. That's how I
Right.
like found him and
Uh-huh.
how it was this like automatic
Connection
connection
there.
with the whole thing about how impressed I felt to tell our story. And that was his big
Thing as
platform
well.
and big thing as well. He lost a friend to a heroin overdose and
Okay.
um,
I was just going to say one of the other myths that I came across was that someone who seems like they have it together is okay. So even when you have it together or seem to have it together, we're not necessarily okay. And the reality is we all struggle. I mean, I think, again, that's a bigger part of the message, right? It's like being famous or being a singer or being a professional or being a therapist or being whatever. It's like we still all struggle, and we still all need to feel a sense of connection to one another, to feel like we have a place to reach out and to just say how we feel and to let people know that sometimes we don't always feel okay or that things aren't always going well for us. And so I think just having a friend, a place, people, a community that offers that is something that we all need more of in our life. And I think you guys are doing some great work and sounds like it's going to be an amazing event.
yes.
And so that's January 17th at
January 17th.
5 o'clock, or
5
starting at
o'clock, the
5.
doors
The
will
doors
open.
open.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
all right.
And we know that last year, I always have to put this plug in.
Okay. Okay.
Our program went a little over last year because it was like, we were still working out all
So,
the stuff.
yeah,
We've got a start time and an end time this year. So
got
it's
it
gonna be
dialed
really,
in. Okay.
yeah, more dialed in this year. Less speakers, more dialed in. Yeah. So
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story, September. And it's an amazing work that you're doing. And I'm glad that you did not, not heed your promptings to continue to act. And sounds like it's paying off. So
thank you.
yeah. Oops.